The August sun was absolutely brutal that afternoon. The kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and dance above the asphalt, turning everything into a wavering mirage. Daniel Crawford sat in his dead Mustang on the side of Route 66, watching another car zoom past without even slowing down. He'd been stranded for over an hour now, and his expensive suit was soaked through with sweat. This wasn't how the day was supposed to go. Daniel had just closed a major deal in Santa Fe, the kind that would add another few million to his already massive fortune. He'd built his tech company from nothing, starting in a cramped apartment 20 years ago with just a laptop and a dream. Now he was worth more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. But none of that mattered out here in the middle of nowhere with a broken-down classic car and no cell phone signal. The Mustang had been his prized possession, a 1967 Shelby that he'd paid over $200,000 for at an auction. He loved that car more than he loved most people. If he was being honest with himself, it represented everything he'd achieved, everything he'd overcome. And now it was sitting here smoking and useless just like he felt in this moment. Daniel got out and kicked the tire in frustration. Bad idea. His expensive Italian leather shoe wasn't made for kicking anything, and pain shot through his foot. He limped back to lean against the car, pulling out his phone for the 100th time. Still no signal. Of course not. This stretch of highway was infamous for dead zones. He'd tried flagging down cars, but most people didn't stop for strangers anymore. Especially not out here in the desert where anything could happen. He couldn't blame them, really. If he saw someone stranded, he'd probably keep driving too. The world had gotten cautious like that. Another vehicle approached, and Daniel barely bothered to look up. It would just fly past like all the others. But then he heard the sound of brakes, the crunch of gravel. He turned to see an old pickup truck pulling over, paint faded by years of desert sun, a dent in the passenger door. The driver's side opened first, and an older man climbed out, moving slow like his joints ached. Had to be in his 70s at least, with silver hair and dark brown skin weathered by decades of hard work. But it was the passenger side that really caught Daniel's attention. A little girl jumped out, couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. She was small and skinny, with her hair pulled back in 2 puffs, wearing overalls that were 3 sizes too big and stained with what looked like motor oil. The moment her feet hit the ground, she was running toward his Mustang. "Oh man, is this a 67 Shelby?" she called out, her eyes wide with excitement. "Can I look under the hood?" Daniel just stared at her. What kind of 8-year-old knew anything about classic Mustangs? The old man caught up to her, moving at his own careful pace. "Now, Mia, remember your manners," he said gently. "We should introduce ourselves first." The girl stopped and looked up at Daniel with a huge smile. "Sorry, mister. I'm Mia. This is my grandpa Ray. We own the auto shop in Socorro. What's wrong with your car?" Daniel found his voice, though he still felt off balance. "I'm Daniel. And honestly, I have no idea what's wrong. It just started overheating and then died completely. There's smoke coming from under the hood." Mia was already moving around to the front of the car. "Can I pop the hood?" "I bet I can figure it out." Daniel looked at her grandfather, who just smiled and nodded. "Go ahead and let her look. Child's been fixing cars since she was 4 years old. Got a gift for it." That seemed impossible, but Daniel hit the hood release anyway. What did he have to lose? Mia lifted the hood like she'd done it 1,000 times, which maybe she had. She leaned in, her small hands moving over the engine with confidence that seemed way too advanced for someone her age. "See here," she said, pointing to something Daniel couldn't even identify. "Your radiator hose is blown. And I think your water pump seized up too. That's why you overheated." Daniel bent down to look where she was pointing. He knew expensive cars and expensive suits and expensive everything, but engines? That was beyond him. He paid people to worry about that stuff. "Can you fix it?" he asked. Mia looked back at her grandfather. "Grandpa, you got the spare hose in the truck? And the tools?" Ray nodded and headed back to the pickup. Mia stayed focused on the engine, running her hands over different parts, muttering to herself about pressure and coolant systems. Daniel just watched, completely fascinated. This little girl in oil-stained overalls knew more about his $200,000 car than he did. Ray came back with a toolbox that looked older than Daniel. Mia dug through it with practiced ease, pulling out wrenches and clamps that seemed too big for her tiny hands. But she handled them like extensions of her own body, twisting and tightening with steady confidence. "This is just a temporary fix," she explained as she worked. "It'll get you to a proper shop, but you're going to need a new water pump for sure. Maybe some other stuff too once we get a better look. Daniel crouched down next to her, watching her work. That's when he saw it. On her right hand, on her small finger, was a ring. Not a cheap kid's ring from a toy machine. This was real jewelry, antique by the look of it. Rose gold with an intricate design, and in the center was a blue stone that caught the light. His heart stopped. Actually stopped for a second before slamming back into rhythm so hard it hurt. That ring. He knew that ring. His hands started shaking. He tried to keep his voice steady. That's a beautiful ring you're wearing. Mia glanced at her hand and smiled. A different kind of smile now. Softer. Sadder. Thanks. It was my mom's. She gave it to me before she died. The world tilted. Daniel had to put his hand on the car to steady himself. It couldn't be. There was no way. But that ring, he'd know it anywhere. It had belonged to his grandmother, passed down through the family. The last time he'd seen it, a social worker was putting it on his baby sister's finger, promising it would help them find each other someday. That was 30 years ago. He'd been 12 years old and his sister had been 3. The foster care system had torn them apart, sent them to different families in different states. He'd spent the last 3 decades looking for her. Hired private investigators, searched through records, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars chasing leads that went nowhere. His sister's name had been Amy. Amy Crawford. Your mom, Daniel said, and his voice came out rough. What was her name? Mia kept working on the engine, not noticing how his whole world was crashing down around him. Her name was Amy Thompson. She was the best mom ever. She died 2 years ago from cancer. Thompson. She'd been adopted, taken a new last name. That's why he could never find her. Daniel couldn't breathe. His baby sister had been here in New Mexico, just a few hours away from where he'd built his company. And he'd never known. She'd lived her whole life, got married, had this amazing daughter, and died without him ever finding her. That ring, he managed to say. Do you know where it came from? Mia finished tightening something and straightened up, wiping her hands on her already dirty overalls. Mom said it came from her birth family. She was adopted when she was really little. She didn't know much about her real family, but she always kept this ring, said it was important, said someday it might help me find where we came from. Daniel had to turn away. Tears were burning in his eyes, and he didn't want this little girl to see him break down. His niece. This incredible, talented, amazing little girl was his niece, his only living blood relative in the whole world. Ray put a gentle hand on his shoulder. The old man seemed to sense something was happening, even if he didn't understand what. You all right there, son? He asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. He wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. But everything had also just changed. Try starting it now, Mia called out, slamming the hood shut. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat with shaking hands. He turned the key and the engine roared to life. Perfect. Like nothing had ever been wrong. Mia grinned at him through the windshield, giving him a thumbs up. So proud of herself, so bright and alive. Daniel got back out of the car. He looked at Ray, at Mia, at this family that had stopped to help a stranger. The family that had raised his sister. The family that was now raising his niece. Where did you say your town was? He asked. Socorro, Ray said, about 15 miles down the road. We've got a shop there if you want us to do the proper repairs. Daniel nodded. 15 miles. His sister had lived 15 miles away and he'd never known. I'll follow you there, he said. I think we need to talk. The drive to Socorro was the longest 15 miles of Daniel's life. He followed Ray's old pickup truck, his mind racing faster than the Mustang's engine. Every few seconds he'd catch a glimpse of Mia in the passenger seat ahead, turning to look back at his car, probably excited about the repair she'd just done. She had no idea. No idea that the stranger she'd just helped was her uncle. No idea that her mother had a brother who'd been searching for her for 3 decades. No idea that everything was about to change. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. 30 years. He'd been looking for Amy for 30 years. He'd imagined finding her 1,000 different ways. Sometimes in his dreams she'd remember him, sometimes she wouldn't. Sometimes they'd hug and cry and make up for lost time. Sometimes she'd be angry that he hadn't found her sooner. But never, not once in all those years of searching and hoping and dreaming had he imagined this. Finding out she was gone. Finding out she'd died 2 years ago and he'd missed his chance. Finding out he had a niece he'd never known existed. The guilt hit him like a truck. While Amy was sick, fighting cancer, he was closing business deals and buying expensive cars. While she was dying, he was flying first class to meetings and staying in five-star hotels. While she took her last breath, he was probably sitting in his office worried about quarterly profits. He'd failed her, after the foster care system tore them apart, after he'd promised her he'd find her someday. After all those years of searching, he'd failed. She'd needed him and he wasn't there. The truck ahead slowed down, turning onto a side street. Daniel followed, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone probably knew everyone else. Old buildings that had been there for decades, local shops, a diner with a flickering neon sign. Ray's truck pulled into the driveway of a modest house with a chain-link fence and a garden out front that someone clearly cared about. Daniel parked on the street and sat there for a moment, trying to pull himself together. He'd built a company worth hundreds of millions. He'd given presentations to rooms full of investors without breaking a sweat. He'd negotiated deals that would make most people's heads spin. But right now, walking up to this little house to meet the family that had raised his sister, that terrified him. Mia was already out of the truck and waving at him. "Come on, Grandma Clara makes the best sweet tea." No turning back now. Daniel got out and followed them through the gate. The front door opened before they even reached it, and a woman stepped out. She was around Ray's age, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. She wore an apron covered in flour. "Ray, you didn't tell me we were having company," she said, but she was smiling. "I would have tidied up." "Found this gentleman stranded out on Route 66, Ray explained. "His Mustang broke down. Mia fixed it." Clara beamed with pride at her granddaughter. "Of course she did. Come on in, come on in. I just made cookies. Can I get you some sweet tea?" Daniel followed them inside. The house was small but spotless, filled with photographs and handmade quilts and the smell of fresh baking. Everything about it screamed family, love, home. Things he'd never really had growing up in the foster system. They settled around the kitchen table and Clara put a plate of chocolate chip cookies in front of them, along with glasses of sweet tea. Mia grabbed 3 cookies and started talking a mile a minute about the Mustang and the broken hose and how she'd fixed it. Daniel tried to focus on what she was saying, but his eyes kept drifting to the photographs on the walls. There in a frame near the kitchen window was a wedding photo. The bride was beautiful, glowing with happiness, and Daniel recognized her immediately even though 30 years had passed since he'd last seen her. Amy, his baby sister. "All grown up, that's my mom," Mia said, following his gaze. Her voice got quiet. "That was her wedding day. She married my dad 5 years before I was born." Daniel couldn't look away from the photo. Amy had their grandmother's smile, had their mother's eyes. She'd grown up beautiful and happy and loved by this family. That should have made him feel better, but somehow it made the loss hurt even more. "She was beautiful," he managed to say. Clara's eyes got misty. "She was our everything. When we adopted her, she was just a tiny thing. 3 years old, so scared and confused. But she bloomed here, became the most wonderful daughter, then the most wonderful mother." "The cancer came on fast," Ray added softly. "By the time they caught it, there wasn't much they could do. She fought hard, though. Lasted longer than the doctors thought she would. Wanted to make sure Mia would be okay." Mia had gone quiet, staring down at her cookies. Daniel wanted to hug her, but didn't think he had the right. "Not yet." "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and meant it more than anyone at this table could possibly understand. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mia looked up at him, and Daniel saw so much of Amy in her face it made his chest hurt. "You seemed really interested in my ring earlier," she said. "How come?" This was it. The moment where everything would either come together or fall apart. Daniel took a deep breath. "That ring belonged to my grandmother," he said carefully. "It's been in my family for generations. The last time I saw it was 30 years ago, when a social worker put it on my little sister's finger. We were being separated by the foster care system. My sister was 3 years old. Her name was Amy." The kitchen went completely silent. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Ray sat up straighter in his chair. Mia just stared at him, her eyes getting wider and wider. "My mom's name was Amy," Mia whispered. "And she was adopted when she was 3. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. "Are you saying," Ray said slowly, "that you're Amy's brother? Her birth brother?" "I've been looking for her for 30 years, Daniel said, and his voice broke. "I hired investigators. I searched through every record I could find. I spent so much money, so much time. But I never found her because her name changed when you adopted her. She became Amy Thompson and I was looking for Amy Crawford. Clara was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Ray reached over and took her hand. She talked about you, Clara said. Not a lot because she was so young when you were separated. But sometimes she'd remember things. A big brother who protected her, who made her laugh. She said you promised you'd find her someday. The guilt came crashing back, worse than before. I tried. I swear I tried. But I failed. You didn't fail, Ray said firmly. The system failed both of you. You were just kids. Mia was still staring at the ring on her finger. So this ring, it's like really important? It was our grandmother's, Daniel explained. Our mother's mother. It's the only thing we had left of our family. When they split us up, the social worker said the ring would help us find each other someday. She was right. It just took longer than anyone expected. Mia looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Does that mean you're my uncle? Daniel nodded, not even trying to hide his own tears anymore. Yes, sweetheart. I'm your uncle. She launched herself at him so fast she nearly knocked her chair over. Her small arms wrapped around his neck and she held on tight. Daniel hugged her back and something inside him that had been broken for 30 years started to heal just a little bit. When they finally pulled apart, everyone at the table was crying. Even Ray, who looked like the kind of man who didn't cry often. This is crazy, Mia said, laughing through her tears. I helped fix your car and you're my uncle? That's like something from a movie. I know, Daniel said, smiling despite everything. Pretty wild coincidence. Wasn't a coincidence, Clara said softly. That was Amy. Looking out for both of you. Making sure you'd finally find each other. They spent the next few hours talking. Daniel told them about his childhood, about the different foster homes, about building his company. Ray and Clara shared stories about raising Amy, about her life, about all the moments Daniel had missed. He learned that Amy had loved fixing things just like Mia did. That she'd worked at the auto shop until she got sick. That she'd been funny and kind and stubborn. That she'd talked about her birth family sometimes, wondering what had happened to her big brother. She never stopped hoping you'd find her, Clara said. Even at the end, she'd talk about you. Wondered if you were okay, if you were happy, if you'd ever know about Mia. That broke Daniel's heart all over again. While he'd been searching for Amy, she'd been hoping he'd find her. They'd both been looking for each other in their own ways, and they'd just run out of time. As the sun started to set, Daniel knew he needed to ask the big question. The one that had been building in his mind all afternoon. I want to be part of Mia's life, he said. If that's okay with you. I'm not trying to take her away or replace you as her family. You raised Amy, and you're raising Mia, and I respect that more than I can say. But she's my niece. My only family, and I'd like to know her. Ray and Clara looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that people who've been married forever can have. We need to think about this, Ray said carefully. Not because we don't believe you or don't want you in Mia's life, but because this is big, really big, and we need to make sure we're doing what's best for her. I understand, Daniel said. And he did. These people didn't know him. For all they knew, he could be anyone. What if we did a DNA test? That would prove the connection. Then we could talk about what comes next. That seems fair, Clara said. And smart. Mia had been quiet, listening to the adults talk. Now she spoke up. I want him to be my uncle. Even if the test says he isn't, I want him to be. Daniel looked at this incredible little girl, so much like her mother, so full of love and trust. I want that too, Mia. More than anything. As he drove away that evening, heading to a hotel in a nearby town, Daniel's mind was spinning. He'd found Amy, but he'd lost her. He'd gained a niece, but missed knowing his sister. Life had given him everything and taken everything away in the same afternoon. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to waste any more time. He wasn't going to miss any more chances. Whatever it took, he was going to be part of Mia's life. He was going to honor Amy's memory by being the uncle this little girl deserved. The ring had done what it was supposed to do, just like that social worker had promised 30 years ago. It had brought them together. It was just a different them than anyone had expected. 2 days later, Daniel stood in a medical testing facility watching as a technician swabbed the inside of his cheek. The DNA test was simple, painless, and would give them answers in about 2 weeks. Mia had already done hers with Ray and Clara the day before. Those 2 weeks felt like the longest of Daniel's life. He tried to focus on work, taking video calls from his hotel room, reviewing reports and signing off on decisions, but his mind kept drifting back to that little house in Socorro, to the family photos on the wall, to Mia's bright smile and the way she'd hugged him. He started doing research. Not the kind of research he'd been doing for 30 years, searching for a lost sister. This was different. He looked into Socorro's schools and found they were underfunded and struggling. He looked into Ray's auto shop and discovered it barely made enough to keep the lights on. He learned about the challenges facing kids in small towns, especially kids with big dreams and bigger potential. The more he learned, the more he understood just how hard Ray and Clara had worked to give Amy and now Mia a good life. They'd done it on almost nothing, just love and determination and sacrifice. When the envelope finally arrived with the test results, Daniel's hands shook so hard he almost couldn't open it. But he knew what it would say before he even read the words. 99.9% match. Uncle and niece family. He drove to Socorro immediately, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like a winning lottery ticket. Because that's what it was, really. He'd won something more valuable than any amount of money. He'd won family. Ray and Clara were waiting for him on their front porch when he pulled up. Mia was at school, which was probably for the best. This conversation needed to happen with just the adults first. Daniel handed them the envelope. Clara read it with trembling hands, then passed it to Ray. When they looked up at him, there were tears in their eyes. "I still can't quite believe it," Clara said softly, "that you just happened to break down right where we were driving. That Mia was with us that day. That she saw your car and wanted to help." "Amy's doing," Ray said, and there was no doubt in his voice. "She's making sure her family finds each other. Making sure Mia won't be alone." They invited him inside, back to that same kitchen table where everything had changed 3 days before. Clara poured coffee this time instead of sweet tea. They all needed something stronger than sweetness for this conversation. "I want to tell you about myself," Daniel said. "About who I am and what I do. Because you deserve to know before we talk about anything else." He told them his full story. Growing up in foster care, never staying in one place long enough to feel like he belonged. Aging out of the system at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and determination. Working 3 jobs while going to community college. Teaching himself to code in a public library. Building his first app in a cramped apartment. The app took off, he explained. It solved a problem a lot of companies had, and they paid good money for it. I took that money and built more apps. Started hiring people. Grew the company. 20 years later, Crawford Tech Solutions has offices in 12 countries and employs over 5,000 people. Ray let out a low whistle. "So when you say you did well for yourself?" "I'm worth about $300 million, Daniel said quietly. "Give or take." The silence that followed was heavy. Clara stared down at her coffee cup. Ray rubbed his face with both hands. "That's why we need to have this conversation," Daniel continued. "Because I want to be part of Mia's life, but I don't want you to think I'm trying to buy my way in or take over. You're her family. You raised Amy. You're raising Mia. I respect that more than you know." "But you're family too," Clara said. "Blood family. And Amy would want Mia to know you." "She would," Ray agreed. "But we need to talk honestly about what that looks like. Because there's a big difference between our world and yours." Daniel nodded. "I know. And I've been thinking about that a lot over the past 2 weeks. I don't want to swoop in and change everything, but I do want to help. And I want to get to know Mia, really know her." "Help how?" Ray asked, his voice careful. "Can I be honest about what I've seen?" Daniel asked. They nodded. "Your shop is struggling. This house is paid off. But you're living on retirement income that barely covers the basics. Mia's school is underfunded. And she's brilliant." "You know she's brilliant?" "She diagnosed and fixed my Mustang in 20 minutes flat. Most adult mechanics couldn't have done that." "She gets it from Amy," Clara said with a sad smile. "Her mother could fix anything. Had a natural talent for it." "Mia should have every opportunity to develop that talent," Daniel said. "The best schools, the best resources, the chance to become whatever she wants to be." Ray's jaw tightened. "We've been doing the best we can." "I know you have," Daniel said quickly. "And you've done an amazing job. But you shouldn't have to do it alone anymore. Let me help." "We're not charity cases," Ray said, his pride showing through. "I'm not offering charity," Daniel replied. I'm offering family. There's a difference. Clara reached over and put her hand on her husband's arm. Let's hear what he has to say, Ray, for Mia's sake. Daniel took a deep breath and laid out what he'd been planning for 2 weeks. A trust fund for Mia's education, enough to send her to any school she wanted all the way through college and beyond. Money to modernize the auto shop, turn it from a struggling business into something thriving and successful, security for Ray and Clara so they could retire without worry, so they could enjoy their remaining years without struggling to make ends meet. I'm not trying to change who Mia is, he said. I don't want her to grow up spoiled or entitled. But I want her to have chances. I want her to have choices. Things Amy never got, things I never got. That's a lot of money, Ray said quietly. It's nothing compared to what I'd give to have found Amy in time, Daniel said, and his voice cracked. I can't get those 30 years back. I can't meet my sister or tell her I never stopped looking, but I can make sure her daughter has everything she needs. I can honor Amy's memory by taking care of the family she left behind. Clara was crying now. We were so worried about what would happen to Mia if something happened to us. We're not young anymore, and we don't have anything to leave her except this house and whatever the shop might sell for someday. Now you don't have to worry, Daniel said, about any of it. They talked for hours, about logistics and concerns and fears. Clara worried that Mia would change, that money would spoil the sweet girl they'd raised. Ray worried they'd lose her, that she'd prefer Daniel's exciting world to their quiet one. Both of them worried about maintaining the values Amy had wanted for her daughter. Daniel listened to every concern and addressed them thoughtfully. He suggested they make all major decisions together as a family. He promised he'd never try to replace them or undermine their authority. He shared his own experiences with sudden wealth and how it had never made him forget where he came from. I want to set up a schedule, he said, where I visit regularly but not so much that I'm overwhelming. Where Mia can have stability and routine but also get to know me. Where we can figure this out together. And what about the money? Ray asked. How does that work? I'll have my lawyers draw up the trust fund for Mia's education. You'll be the trustees along with me. So we all have to agree on how it's used. For the shop, I can provide investment capital to modernize it. But it stays in your name. You run it how you see fit. And for your retirement, I'd like to set up an account that gives you a comfortable income for the rest of your lives. Ray shook his head in amazement. This doesn't feel real. I know, Daniel said. But it is. And I want you to know that I'm not doing this to make myself feel better, or to ease my guilt about not finding Amy. I'm doing it because you're family, because you gave my sister a life she wouldn't have had otherwise, because you're giving Mia the same thing, and because that matters more than any amount of money. When Mia got home from school that afternoon, she found all 3 adults sitting at the kitchen table with red eyes and tissues. She dropped her backpack and froze. What's wrong? Is someone sick? No, baby, Clara said, opening her arms. Mia ran to her grandmother and hugged her tight. Everything's okay. Actually, everything's better than okay. They showed her the DNA test results, though she'd never doubted they'd come back positive. Then Daniel explained in simple terms she could understand that he wanted to be part of her life. That he wanted to help make sure she had every opportunity to chase her dreams. What kind of dreams? Mia asked. Whatever dreams you have, Daniel said. If you want to be a mechanic, we'll make sure you get the best training in the world. If you want to be an engineer, we'll send you to the best schools. If you want to be an astronaut or a race car driver or anything else, we'll figure out how to make it happen. Mia's eyes got wide. Really, anything? Anything, he promised. She thought about it for a moment, chewing her lip the same way Amy used to do, according to the photos Daniel had seen. Then she looked up at him with complete seriousness. I want to design cars. Really cool ones that go super fast but also don't hurt the environment. Is that a thing? Daniel laughed, and it felt good to laugh after so much crying. That's absolutely a thing. Automotive engineering. And you know what? You're already on your way. Not many kids your age can diagnose and fix a broken Mustang. Mom taught me, Mia said quietly, before she got sick. She said cars were like puzzles, and if you understood how all the pieces fit together, you could fix anything. She was right, Daniel said, and she'd be really proud of you. They spent the rest of the evening talking about the future, about Mia's school and the shop and all the possibilities that were suddenly opening up. But Daniel made sure to emphasize one thing over and over. None of this changes who you are, he told Mia. You're still you. You still live here with Grandma and Grandpa. You still go to your school and have your friends. I'm just adding to your life, not replacing anything. Are you going to live here too? She asked hopefully. Daniel glanced at Ray and Clara. They'd talked about this. Not full-time. I have a company to run, and that means I travel a lot. But I was thinking about buying a small house here in Socorro, somewhere I can stay when I visit. Would that be okay? More than okay, Ray said. We'd like that. As Daniel drove back to his hotel that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in 30 years. He felt like he had a family. Not the family he'd started with, and not the family he'd hoped to find. But a family nonetheless. Amy might be gone, but her daughter was here. Her parents were here. And together, they were going to make sure Mia had everything she needed to become whoever she wanted to be. The ring on Mia's finger had done its job. It had brought them together. Now it was up to them to build something from this impossible, miraculous connection. 3 months passed in a blur of activity, phone calls, and careful planning. Daniel kept his promise about not rushing things. He visited Socorro every other weekend, staying in a hotel at first while his lawyers worked on purchasing a modest house on the edge of town. Nothing flashy, just a comfortable 3-bedroom place where he could feel at home. During those visits, he got to know Mia in small, precious moments. He'd show up at the shop on Saturday mornings and watch her work alongside Ray, her small hands confident with tools that seemed too big for her. He'd have dinner with the family, learning Clara's recipes and hearing stories about Amy's childhood that made him laugh and cry in equal measure. Slowly, carefully, they were building something real, but Daniel knew there was more he wanted to do. More he needed to do. So on a cold November afternoon, he asked Ray and Clara if they'd meet him at his new house. He'd just gotten the keys that morning, and there was something important he wanted to discuss. They arrived together, Mia bouncing with excitement at seeing her uncle's new place. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy, with a big backyard and a garage that made Mia's eyes light up. Can we turn the garage into a workshop? She asked immediately. Already planning on it, Daniel said with a smile. But first we need to talk, all of us. Including you, Mia, because this affects you most of all. They settled in the living room, sitting on the furniture Daniel had just had delivered. He'd bought comfortable pieces, the kind made for family gatherings, not the expensive designer stuff he had at his penthouse in the city. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Daniel started, about the future, about what I promised you all. And I want to make sure we're all on the same page before we move forward. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Inside were documents his lawyers had spent weeks preparing. This is the trust fund for Mia's education, he explained, handing the papers to Ray. It's set up so that she can go to any school she wants, anywhere in the world. Elementary, middle school, high school, college, graduate school. Whatever she needs. You, Clara, and I are all listed as trustees. Ray's hands shook as he looked at the numbers. Daniel, this is over $5 million. Education is expensive, Daniel said simply. Especially good education. I want her to have options. Clara put her hand over her mouth, tears already forming. This is too much. It's not enough, Daniel countered gently. Not for what you gave Amy. Not for what you're giving Mia. He pulled out another set of documents. This is for the shop. I'm proposing we invest $250,000 into modernizing it. New equipment, updated systems, maybe expand the building. The shop stays in your name, Ray. You run it how you want. But I'd like us to rename it Amy's Automotive, if that's okay with you, as a memorial. Ray looked at Clara, then at Mia, then back at Daniel. His voice was thick when he spoke. She'd love that. She always talked about taking over the shop someday, making it something special. Then we'll make it special for her, Daniel said. And maybe if Mia wants, she can work there during summers once she's old enough. Learn the business side as well as the mechanical side. I'd love that, Mia burst out. Can we get one of those big lifts? And a diagnostic computer like the fancy shops have? Whatever you need, Daniel promised. He pulled out the last set of documents. And this is for you both. A retirement account that will pay you a monthly income for the rest of your lives. Enough so you never have to worry about money again. You can work at the shop because you enjoy it, not because you have to. Clara was crying openly now. Why are you doing this? You don't owe us anything. I owe you everything, Daniel said, his own voice breaking. You gave Amy a home, a family, love, things she wouldn't have had in the foster system. Things I didn't have, You took a scared little 3-year-old girl and raised her into someone wonderful, someone who then had a daughter just as wonderful. That's worth more than any amount of money. Ray set the papers down and stood up. For a moment, Daniel thought he'd gone too far, that he'd offended the older man's pride. But then Ray walked over and pulled him into a hug. "Thank you," Ray said simply. "Not for the money, for finding us, for wanting to be part of this family." They spent the next hour going over the details, asking questions, making sure everyone understood and agreed. Daniel's lawyer had written everything to be clear and fair, with protections in place to make sure Mia's interests were always put first. "There's one more thing," Daniel said as they were wrapping up, "and this is the big one. I've been looking at schools for Mia." Clara tensed immediately. "What do you mean?" "Her current school is fine for basics, but she needs more," Daniel said carefully. "She needs programs that can challenge her, teachers who understand gifted students, resources for advanced science and math. I found a STEM academy in Albuquerque that's one of the best in the country." "Albuquerque is over an hour away," Ray said, his voice hard. "I know. That's why I'm suggesting she board there during the week and come home on weekends. They have a program specifically designed for gifted students from rural areas." "Absolutely not," Clara said firmly. "She's 9 years old. She's not leaving home." Mia had been quiet, listening to the adults talk. Now she spoke up. "Can I say something?" They all turned to look at her. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, looking smaller than her 9 years, but somehow older too. "I've been thinking about this," she said carefully, "about school and learning and stuff. And I know my school's okay, but I get bored sometimes. They don't have the classes I want. They don't have the things I need to learn about engineering." "Baby, you're doing fine where you are," Clara protested. "I'm doing okay," Mia corrected. "But Uncle Daniel's right. I could be doing better. And I want to learn everything I can about cars and engines and design. I want to be really, really good at it." "You'd be gone all week," Ray said quietly. "But I'd come home every weekend," Mia pointed out. "And it's not like I'd be across the country. It's just Albuquerque. We could talk on the phone every night." Daniel could see the battle playing out on Ray and Clara's faces, the desire to keep their granddaughter close versus the desire to give her every opportunity. It was the same battle parents and grandparents had fought forever. "What if we tried it for 1 semester?" Daniel suggested. "Just to see how it goes? If Mia hates it or if it's too hard being apart, she can come back to her old school. No pressure. No judgment." Clara wiped her eyes. "I don't want to lose her." Mia jumped up and threw her arms around her grandmother. "You're not losing me. I'll never lose you. You're my grandma. But this is a chance to make my dreams come true. Mom would want me to take it." That was the argument that won, the mention of Amy and what she would have wanted. Because they all knew Amy would have wanted her daughter to have every opportunity, even if it meant sacrifice. 1 semester. Ray finally agreed. "We try it for 1 semester. And if it doesn't work, we reassess." "That's all I'm asking," Daniel said, relief flooding through him. They moved on to logistics. The academy started its spring semester in January, which gave them 2 months to prepare. Daniel would pay for everything, of course. Tuition, room and board, supplies, travel expenses for weekend trips home. He'd also make sure Mia had a good computer and a phone so she could stay in touch with her grandparents every day. "I want to be involved too," Daniel said. "I'll drive down from the city to have lunch with her once a week. Make sure she's adjusting, okay? I can be there in 90 minutes, so it's not a big deal." "You'd do that?" Mia asked, her eyes wide. "Come see me every week?" "Every single week," Daniel promised. "You're my family. My only family. There's nowhere I'd rather be." As the sun set and they prepared to leave, Daniel walked them out to their truck. Mia was chattering about all the things she wanted to learn, already making plans for her future. But Clara hung back, catching Daniel's arm. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Anything. Do you resent us for having the time with Amy that you didn't get?" Daniel thought about it honestly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Sometimes I see the photos and hear the stories and I get angry at the universe for taking that away from me. But I could never resent you. You gave her a life. A good life. That's all I ever wanted for her." Clara squeezed his arm. "She talked about you sometimes, especially when she first came to us. She'd say she had a brother who was brave and strong, who protected her. I think she never forgot you, even when the memories got fuzzy." "I never forgot her either," Daniel said. "Not for 1 single day." "I know," Clara said. And I think that's why this all happened the way it did. You were meant to find each other, even if it took 30 years. You were meant to be part of Mia's life. That night, alone in his new house, Daniel walked through the empty rooms and imagined them filled with life, with Mia's laughter and Ray's stories and Clara's cooking, with holidays and birthdays and ordinary weeknight dinners, with family. He'd spent his whole adult life building a company, making money, achieving success. And none of it had filled the hole that Amy's absence had left. But this family he was slowly becoming part of, this felt like it might finally heal something in him that had been broken since he was 12 years old. The next morning, Daniel called his office and cleared his calendar for the rest of the week. Then he drove to the shop where Ray was already working and Mia was getting ready for school. "What are you doing here?" Ray asked, surprised. "Thought you were heading back to the city." "Change of plans," Daniel said. "I'm staying through Thanksgiving. Figured I should spend the holiday with family." Ray's face broke into a huge smile. "Well then, you better learn how to help properly. Grab a wrench. We've got a transmission that needs rebuilding." Daniel had never rebuilt a transmission in his life, but he grabbed a wrench and followed Ray into the shop, ready to learn. Ready to be part of something bigger than himself. Ready to finally be the brother and uncle he'd always wanted to be, even if he was 30 years late. 6 months had passed since that day on Route 66, and everything had changed in the best possible way. It was a warm April morning when Daniel pulled into the parking lot of Amy's Automotive, still getting used to seeing the new sign with his sister's name. The building had been expanded and updated, with state-of-the-art equipment inside and a fresh coat of paint outside. But it still had the same heart, the same family feel that Ray had built over 40 years. Inside, Ray was training 2 new mechanics he'd hired once business picked up. The investment had paid off faster than any of them expected. Turns out, a well-equipped shop with fair prices and honest work attracted customers from all over the region. They were booked solid 3 weeks out. "Morning, Uncle Daniel." Mia's voice called from under a lifted Honda. She was home for the weekend, like every weekend, and had already been at the shop for 2 hours, even though it was Saturday. "Morning, kiddo. Don't you ever sleep in?" Her head popped out from under the car, grease smudged across her cheek, grinning. "Sleep is for people who aren't excited about life. I've got a lot to do today." Daniel laughed. That was pure Mia. The STEM Academy had been perfect for her. She'd struggled with homesickness the first few weeks, calling Clara in tears more than once. But she'd pushed through, made friends, dove into her classes with an enthusiasm that amazed her teachers. Her grades were exceptional, and she'd already joined the robotics club and the engineering design team. But she never missed a weekend at home. Every Friday afternoon, Daniel would pick her up and drive her back to Socorro, using that 90-minute drive to catch up on her week. Every Sunday evening, he'd drive her back, making sure she had everything she needed for the week ahead. Those drives had become some of his favorite times, just him and his niece talking about everything and nothing. "Grandma's making lunch," Ray called out. "Said to tell you both to wash up and get to the house by noon." "I need 30 more minutes with this transmission," Mia said, already ducking back under the car. Daniel shook his head, smiling. He'd learned more about cars in the past 6 months than he'd learned in his entire life before. He still wasn't great at it, but he could handle basic maintenance now. More importantly, he understood why Mia loved it so much. There was something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. At noon, they walked over to the house together, both covered in grease despite their best efforts to clean up. Clara took one look at them and laughed. "You two are hopeless. Go wash up properly before you touch anything in my clean kitchen." The kitchen wasn't just clean, it was transformed. One of the first things Daniel had done was modernize it for Clara. New appliances and countertops while keeping the warmth and character she'd built over the years. She'd protested at first, but he'd pointed out that she spent more time in that kitchen than anywhere else, and she deserved to enjoy it. Over lunch, Mia talked nonstop about a project she was working on at school. Something about designing a more efficient engine using hybrid technology. Daniel understood about half of what she was saying, but he loved watching her eyes light up when she explained things. "And Mr. Chen, that's my engineering teacher, he said I could submit the design to this national competition for middle school students. The winner gets a scholarship and their project showcased at this huge automotive conference." "That's amazing, baby," Clara said proudly. "When's the deadline?" 6 weeks. I'm going to need to work on it pretty much every day after classes." Mia paused, looking worried. Is that okay? I know I usually call you guys every evening, but I might not have time every single night. You focus on your project, Ray said firmly. We'll be fine. Just call when you can. After lunch, Daniel helped Ray at the shop while Mia went inside to work on homework. The Saturday afternoon was peaceful, filled with the sounds of tools and classic rock playing on the radio. This had become Daniel's routine, showing up every other weekend to be useful rather than just visiting. Ray had taught him patience, showed him that not everything needed to be fixed immediately, that sometimes you had to take your time and do things right. Can I ask you something? Ray said, setting down his wrench. Sure. Are you happy? Really happy? Daniel thought about the question. 6 months ago, if someone had asked him if he was happy, he would have said yes. He had money, success, respect in his industry, but now he understood the difference between being successful and being happy. Yeah, he said honestly. I'm happier than I've been since I was 12 years old. Before Amy and I got separated. Ray nodded, satisfied with that answer. Good, because you've given us so much. The shop, the money, the opportunities for Mia. But the thing we're most grateful for is you. Having you here. Being part of this family. I'm the one who should be grateful, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. You gave Amy a life. Now you're giving me one too. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Ray spoke again. I've been thinking about something. Got an idea I want to run by you. What's that? The shop's doing real well now. Better than I ever expected. And I'm getting old whether I want to admit it or not. I was thinking, what if we set things up so that Mia could take over someday? If she wants to, I mean. Not forcing her into anything. Daniel felt a warmth spread through his chest. I love that idea. Could be her home base, Ray continued, getting excited. She could go off to college, study engineering, work for car companies maybe. But she'd always have this place to come back to. Her mother's shop. Her family's business. Let's talk to her about it, Daniel suggested. See what she thinks. That evening, after dinner, they all sat down in the living room. Daniel had brought the Mustang back to Socorro months ago, had it fully restored at Amy's Automotive. It sat in his garage now, but he let Mia drive it around the neighborhood sometimes, sitting in the passenger seat and pretending his heart wasn't in his throat the whole time. Mia, we wanted to talk to you about the future, Ray started. She looked up from her tablet where she was sketching engine designs. Okay? The shop is yours if you want it, Daniel said. Not now, obviously, but someday. After college, after whatever else you want to do. It'll always be here for you. Mia's eyes widened. Really? You'd let me run Grandpa's shop? It's not my shop anymore, Ray said gently. It's your mom's shop now. And it can be yours when you're ready. But what if I want to work for a big car company, or design race cars, or do something else entirely? Then you do that, Daniel said. This is just an option, not an obligation. We want you to chase whatever dreams you have. But we also want you to know you'll always have a home here. Always have something to come back to if you want. Mia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still hovering over her tablet. Then she looked up with tears in her eyes.